Hi everyone, I'm your IELTS tutor Jack and welcome back to another episode of the IELTS Plus English podcast. Today's topic is comedy, a topic that I really like. I love telling jokes, I love hearing jokes, and I love the genre of comedy. Now, don't forget, if you want to have today's handout, the podcast handout, don't forget it is free and it is on www.jacks-english.com. If you go there, you'll see a kind of free content section, so it's easy to find. And if you are in Korea, don't forget to check out Naver Cafe, my Naver Cafe, Yongguk Yongo Jack's English. Let's get on with today's episode. So, comedy. Part 1, warm up. Do you like comedy? I love comedy. I think comedy is a wonderful genre. I particularly like comedy dramas and movies. There's a variety of types of comedy I like. I like parody, satire, and particularly I like stand-up comedy, which is very common in England. Already 3 or 4 key words from today's podcast handout, so check that out and see what those mean, and we'll do another part 1. What kind of comedy is popular in your country? I come from England, so I would say irony is a really popular kind of comedy, particularly sarcasm, which is kind of the dark side of irony. I don't like sarcasm personally, but it's fairly popular in our comedy. Also, stand-up comedy is really popular. This is where a comedian stands on stage and delivers jokes or stories and just has a microphone. No props, nothing else up there. And I personally really like that style. Okay, one more. Are you good at telling jokes? Not good at telling jokes, but I do like to tell stories which can be funny, you know, they can be indirectly funny, but I suppose I don't have the memory for jokes. I don't remember the jokes, so I avoid telling jokes. Okay, a very honest one today. Let's move on to part 2. Put 2 minutes on the clock, and let's see. We have the question, describe a movie or TV program that made you laugh. Okay, nothing comes to my mind. Perhaps we'll go with the simple one. Comes to my mind first. So 2 minutes on the clock starts now. I'd like to tell you about Friends. I first watched Friends maybe 20 or 25 years ago, a long time ago when I was young. And even though I was young, I really enjoyed the style of humour. I remember watching the episode and I remember just really liking the characters particularly. I liked Ross. I think I kind of connected to Ross the most. I could understand his situation and personality more. I also loved Joey and Phoebe. These were some of the characters that really stood out to me from the start. Let me tell you a little more about Friends. Now, Friends it's a comedy drama, so it's called a sitcom, situational comedy, and it's got a lot of irony, maybe a little sarcasm, definitely a lot of slapstick, and that's I would say, a bit more of an American style humor, which generally I don't like, but in Friends I really enjoyed. It has 6 characters. I'm not going to name them because it would take me too long. But they live in New York, and the drama centers on them in their apartments and their daily lives. And particularly, I remember they spend a lot of time in a coffee shop. And it's just constant jokes and funny stories. And Chandler, he's the kind of sarcastic one. So that's what I really remember. For me personally, I loved it. And funnily enough, still now I can happily watch episodes and really enjoy going back to the start and watching all 10 series. Oh, that was very quick. Okay. Again, nothing came to my mind immediately, but although Friends is not my favorite drama, there are so many movies and dramas that I prefer. It's just such an easy one to talk about, and I would say that for most of my students, Friends is a really easy one to talk about. So that's why I chose it. I followed my structure very strictly, though I didn't get to the future section. Okay, let's do a couple of part 3s and then we'll wrap up. This is where it gets a little tricky. What is the difference between comedy on TV and comedy in books? Well, it's a difficult question, but I would say the biggest difference is that on TV you can use a lot of slapstick comedy. Slapstick comedy is very visual comedy where people get hurt, they slip over, pushing each other, something falls on them. It's very physical comedy and, as I said, very visual. So the medium of TV is the perfect medium for showing that type of comedy. I would say comedy in books, because it's done through words, it has to be more subtle. Of course, you can do things like irony or satire, but it has to be constructed through words, so it's very, very different. Not a bad answer. I'm quite happy with that. Let's go to the last part 3. Is humor easy to translate from one language to another? I would say that it's not easy to translate mostly, because humor is as much about culture as it is about just the humor itself. Humor comes from people being able to connect to it. It's, when you look at the humor in England, it very often connects to the story of people living in England and the difficulties we face. And the same can be said for Korea, which is where I live now. So also, there are different styles of humor depending on the country. Koreans like slapstick, I would say, whereas England, we prefer quite simple stand-up comedy. So on the whole, no, humor is not easy to translate from one language to another. Okay, notice that, with these complicated answers, I always try to conclude in order to tie my answer together. And to conclude an answer, you can use something like I did. On the whole, that's a good pattern. In conclusion, overall, those are some typical patterns I use to wrap an answer up. And that is everything I have time for. So I hope you enjoyed this episode on comedy. If you did, don't forget to like this video, like the podcast, whatever you're listening or watching it on, please like, comment, subscribe, do all of these things. And come and check out www.jacksenglish.com in order to find the free materials and various other free content. So I hope you have a wonderful week this week, and I will be back very soon with the next topic, crime and punishment. Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye.